Hey everyone, thanks for joining me today. Today we're going over, let's do a sun catcher together. So this is a sun catcher that I recently completed, and here I am cutting it. Here I am painting it after I also engraved it, and I think he turned out pretty darn cute. So the reason I'm calling it a sun catcher is because it's not stained glass, because there's no stain and no glass. Now we will be going over designing in part 2 video. These videos were starting to get a little bit long if I just left it into one. So we've got 2 parts. Now you will have to be a subscriber and go to the DiSignsCdn page so you can download the SUNCATCHER files that I have uploaded. Okay, so in the discussion, you'll see everybody, even in the group, members' posts. The featured, just at this top tab here, are exclusively my posts. So if you want to see little notes that I've made, videos that I've posted, files that I've posted, you'll see that more in the featured. Now, if you go to the files portion of our group, and I'm just going to refresh this, you will see all the recent downloads or uploads of files that I've put that are free to download. Okay, so that will then go to your download on your computer. Now, at the time of this video, I haven't uploaded this file yet. Okay, so this one will be uploaded shortly at the time this video is posted to YouTube. And I have included, because I realize not everybody who's a subscriber speaks English, so I've given you a basic template, and I've also given you one with the guardian angel there, and I've also given you the print. You're welcome to make this bigger. I sized it up at 4.5 by 4.5 because I thought it would make a pretty good starting point for you guys. And it can be a Christmas ornament. You can add whatever you want onto it. But I'm doing Don't Drive Faster Than Your Guardian Angel Can Fly because I want these to be able to hang on rear view mirrors and some very special people of mine's vehicles. Okay, so that is going to be uploaded, so you can download that. Okay, let's get started on the one I designed. Now, I would love to give this to you guys, but Pooh Bear is licensed. So I am not giving it away. I am not selling it because I don't want the big D corporation to get angry with me. But yes, so I made that, and you'll see I made some bumblebees, and I can change the text to change the names on it, and I really like the text Bright Holiday, and I got that from Devant.com for free. Okay, so there I am, just changing the name on one of the bees so I can make custom bees, and you can do this too with certain names. And if I show you the wireframe, you'll see that I have everything in vector art. Okay, that's why you can see the outline. If it was a photo, it would just turn into like a grayscale photo when I turned off the wireframe, or turned on the wireframe, I should say. So you'll see that I have a white bounding box around everything. And I've duplicated it. I like duplicating things because I want to make sure I always keep an original if I'm doing any changes. So I'll duplicate that, and I will just move that on over. So turn back on the wireframe. So then you'll see this is my cut file to the right, my engrave file to the left. And I'm just going to quickly show you exporting. I'm not going to do a lot of exporting in this video because I find that, I don't want to repeat myself too much. I do a lot of exporting in my videos. So now I'm just making a file folder in here. to place my file once I export it. I've already got one named, so I'm just going to replace that yes, because when I export it, it's the selected objects. I do transparent. 300 dpi for me keeps it to size. If you are using Inkscape, apparently it has to be 96 dpi, and that will keep it to scale for opening in LaserGRBL. So I'm just going to select that one, replace the file again, just to do it one more time for you. Selected object, transparent, 300 dpi, and okay. So now that is my bears and my bees engraving and cutting file. And my SUNCATCHER portion itself, I have made a front, a back, and a print. And you'll see exactly what I mean in a little while. Let's get into LaserGRBL, finally, and make it nice and big. So I am now going to open up my cutting file. Now, once I open up this folder, you're going to see that I have a number of SVGs. Sorry, the SVG file is not available because SVG files are very experimental still with LaserGRBL. I find with my SIGNMASTER, when I import it into LaserGRBL, they're not to scale, so it's changing the size. You also cannot change how you're cutting them. You'll see what I mean a little later on in this video, but PNGs are so much easier to work with. Okay, so I am opening up my SUNCATCHER file here. The parameters I'm going to do today is sharp. I have it on vectorize with no filling. Now I have slowed down the video a bit, so if you want to jot down what the vectorize options that I have on the left hand side here are, you're welcome to, but I'm also going to put that in the description below this video. So I'll have that all written in there for you as well. So you don't have to worry about pausing and rewinding the video. Now I do have adaptive quality put on. Makes your shapes really nice and beautiful. I have my optimized travel turned off. If I had that on, what would happen was it would cut the outside outline first. And then if your piece drops down and it goes to cut the inside pieces, well, they're not going to cut through. So by turning the optimized travel off, all my inside pieces are going to cut first, and then it will do my final outline last. So again, no filling. And I'm going to click on next. Okay, so for my speed with my 10-watt laser, I'm going to use 225 millimeters per minute. I have it on constant power. My minimum is 949 for 94.9. S max, you can see. I've also auto-sized it, so it will cut it to scale of the file that I designed, and then I click next. Now, of course, my machine needs to be turned on and connected, so all these bottom buttons would be lining up. But basically, once I have my material lined up, my engraver properly focused, I home the machine, I frame it, because I always burn from the home position. And the material I'm going to use today that I got from Amazon is Basswood. Okay, Basswood is a little bit cheaper, very easy to cut. Birch plywood seems to have gone up considerably in price. So on my cutting platform, because it's not metal, so magnets don't stick to it, what I'm just using is little adhesive felt pads. Okay, keeps the material slightly raised. It doesn't slip, but you want your material slightly raised so that your pieces will drop down just a hair, so you can see that you have cut completely through the material. And right now, because my OLM3 10-watt laser has a kickstand, I am focusing with my machine turned off. Okay, don't be moving around your laser with your machine turned on. Make sure it's turned off. Okay, you can cause an electric static charge that can fry your motherboard. Now, if you're finding that your platform or your material is not level in the number of spots that you should be focusing to, you can wedge it up to make it level. Okay, so now I'm finally going to turn my machine off. And right now I'm homing my laser. And you'll see I have it set to nice and slow because I do not want a lot of bounce back. Okay, so you can change your homing rate so that it goes nice and slow. This is going to give you more accuracy when you are homing your machine as well. And that's in LaserGRBL configurations and settings. So I'm just doing a cut test circle. In LaserGRBL 6.2.1, it now does have cutting tests in it. I find they're very small. So I will just use a circle and square. And here I was testing out an SVG because SVGs are still quite experimental. And you're going to see it didn't work well for me later on in the video. But my PNG worked very well. And here I am just poking out some pieces that it's finally cut with an X-Acto knife. I did have a few little burrs, but it's very easy just to take the knife and make a little tick. Any small pieces, I just used a safety pin to poke that out. So as you can see, if as long as you focus properly, you can definitely get really nice detail, really fine detail. So let's open up our Poo Engrave file with the bumblebees. And yours will be the angel file if you choose to engrave and cut it. I realize some of you don't necessarily like to paint, so you can print that on a white sticker as well and apply that to just the outside piece that we're going to cut. You can do that as well. You don't have to paint, you can print. So I'm going to engrave on smooth. I have my black and white turned on, line to line tracing, horizontal at 7 lines. Now I can move this black and white slider here on the left hand side a little bit, and you'll see your lines get thicker or thinner or more clear. I find LaserGRBL does a really nice job of tracing your PNGs as long as they're nice and clean. So we are going to engrave at 2600 millimeters per minute, dynamic power. I'm popping a 50 in there for 5% minimum and 950 for 95%. I auto size it and click on next so that auto sizing brings it up to scale. So there is now my engraving file. Now I'm going to go into file, append file, and I'm going to open the cut file. So I've got the Poo cut sample file there. I'm going to open that, and just like the settings that we used for the initial SUNCATCHER, again I'm going back to sharp. I'm going back to vectorize, and again I'm going to have the vectorize options in the description of the video below, so you don't have to try to jot this down so quickly. Again, adaptive quality turned on. My optimized travel is turned off. No filling, and I'll click next. So I'm going to use the exact same cuttings that I used, 225 millimeters, constant power. Okay, I don't have to worry about clicking the auto size button because in my grave file, with the white bounding box that I put it there, that it pops up my cut file perfectly aligned. And if I want to do a second pass, again, I go to File, Append. Don't change any of my settings, and I click Next. So now, this is now an engraved file. It will engrave first, then cut one pass, then cut a second pass. So you can append as many times as you need for your certain power of laser if you need to do more than one pass. Now, if you're having issues with your cutting lining up as you're doing it, I do suggest turning the rapid down to about half speed, and those are on your interactive sliders, and you can do that before you start engraving. If your engraving looks a little light, slow down your linear a little bit. Okay, and you can do this while it's engraving. That's why it's called interactive sliders. But before it starts cutting, make sure you put that back to the reset button. And here you can see that I've just completed engraving Pooh Bear, and now I am just doing the cutting outline. And I've put your orange glasses on for you guys, so I'm not blinding you with the blue light. So again, make sure that you are using good eye protection for when you're laser engraving and cutting as well. Now I'm actually just using one pass on the basswood. That's all I need with my 10-watt laser at the settings that I used. And I'm just going to speed it up here, go a little bit faster, and you will see the piece drop down so that I know I've cut it completely all the way through in one pass. And I am just going to lift my material up, and it leaves my engraving and cutting behind. So yes, there is a little bit of scorching on there, but I want my engraving nice and deep because we're going to be painting this. So the pieces that I engrave, I will sand with like a 220 grit sandpaper because I don't want to get overzealous with it. I just want to get rid of the scorching, not my lines that I want to leave behind. I'm also going to sand my B's down. And I'm going to actually sand my SUNCATCHER down a little bit as well because I want it to be able to take the paint. And that's it all sanded down. Now I am using Rust-Oleum black the 2 times, gloss or flat. It's totally up to you. You just want to make sure you get the front, the back, paint, flip it around so that you're making sure the paint is getting to all the grooves. After I've done that and I've let that dry, I'll actually give it a clear as well. Thin coats with the 2 times clear because we don't want it running as well. And you'll see why in a little bit of why I want all the inside pieces completely sealed, because I don't want any brown tannins coming from out of my engraving into what I'm going to be doing. Now, I ordered this silicone painting mat from Amazon. It's about $15 Canadian. I absolutely love it. And it's going to come in handy not only for paint will just flake off of it, but for what else we're going to be doing in a little bit. So the paint I'm using today, Craft Smart, I get from the Michael's Craft Store. It's water-based acrylic paint, but really anything that you get even from the dollar store, I usually use. Now, I do use Ohuhu every now and then. It's an outdoor acrylic paint, and you can get a whole set of beautiful colors off of Amazon as well. So right now, I'm just, because they're all water-based, I can use different brands of the water-based acrylic to mix them together to get my Pooh Bear color. So I'm mixing that up. I'll wipe my brush off. You'll see that I dabbed it in some water because I like thinning this down. It will go on a lot smoother. Now, it's not as thin as what I used for my Alice in Wonderland painting on Live Edge. Okay, it's a little bit thicker, but it smooths out really nice. So you'll see I'm just put it on there and I'm pulling out. I don't go too close to the edges when I first start out because then I can pull it towards the edges without it running into my engraved lines. And when I need some more paint on my brush, I'll actually add a little bit more water. Okay, I'll dab it in the paint, mix it in a little bit. So you'll see, and then I roll my brush again to get that point. And that's going to help you paint accurately, that you're not filling in your engravings. But that's okay. I'm going to show you how to fix that if that should happen. Now I will be speeding this up eventually, but I'm just going to show you that I'm just going to add a little bit of white to put some highlights on Pooh Bear. Okay, this will give him some dimensions. So you'll use highlights and lowlights. And I just imagine, say the sun is coming from the right-hand top of him. Excuse me. That's how I figure out where I'm going to put my highlights on him. And then for the shadows, well, that would be about his bottom of his arms, under the shirt, right where you would typically see shadows. And I figured I'd just fast forward there because you didn't need to spend time just watching me paint red. So his right hand sleeve I just did with one coat, and then the insides I went in just with a couple more coats to darken up the red. So that's how you can shadow as well, by doing a couple coats. Let's move on over to the bees. So I've already painted their basic bodies yellow, and I've let that dry. And then I'm going to take a little bit of the brown that I used for Pooh Bear there, and, you know, a lighter white. And I think I go in with another darker brown, but I'm just making these furry little bumblebees. Because if you look at a bumblebee, they kind of look, you know, furry. They do to me anyways. So that's why I'm just going to do little strokes on each of the bees in a variety of colors, just to give them dimensions. And now I'm just using a very fine brush just to add some blue shadowing on the honey pot. So it's a very fine brush to be able to get around the lettering. So I start away from the lettering and then I'll work my way back in, so I don't have a lot of paint on the brush when I get back to anything that I've engraved. And now I'm adding some white here. So again, rolling my brush, getting a point, and I'm just going to add some highlights to the wings on the honeybees. And if you don't want a blunt white or a bright white, that's why I have the tissue there. You can dab them with the tissue just to give it more of a transparent look. But that's totally up to you on what you need to do. Now, if you've made a white line accidentally too thick, you can go over it with the blue and make the white line appear even finer. So there, I'm finally going in with my final bright light yellow on my bees. And that's it. I'm just taking a final look, make sure I didn't miss anything. It's time to fix where I kind of over sanded one of the lines there. So I'm going to take some of the burnt umber, a little bit of black. If I've made it too dark, well, I'll just add a little bit of brown. All these water-based paints that I have totally mix up fine together. So again, with a very fine brush with a nice point, I'll put the paint on it, roll it to bring the point back, and that I don't have too much paint on my brush. And I'm just going to fix this line that I got a little overzealous with while sanding. My sander wasn't completely level when I got to the edge, so I took a little bit too much off that edge. But you can totally fix it. And if you had any little other spots where some of the paint might have gone down in, this is the perfect time to touch that up as well. Okay, hang on to your shirts. I bought some koala transparency film for laser printers. If you have a laser printer, make sure you are getting the transparency film for lasers. Okay, there are transparency films available for inkjet printers. I will go over them after a little bit here. So transparency film, it's kind of like a little acetate. Okay, but it will have a special film on it for certain printers. And I have a laser printer that I just picked off of Facebook Marketplace. For a big $50, I replaced the toners with aftermarket brands. And yeah, in the long run, they can be expensive, but the toner cartridges last a long time. So now it's time to print our stained glass pattern. So I actually took the file because I used 11.8 inch by 11.8 inch Basswood material. And of course your sheets are only 8.5 by 11. I needed to kind of tile the pieces. So I will be putting those pieces together. And apparently that's a me thing. I always like to try the hardest thing first. And in order to make my printout here, I'll just turn the wireframe on. I just duplicated the SUNCATCHER a few times, and then I just put white bounding boxes, okay, drew those over top of pieces that I didn't need, and then I layered them up so that my final product was this. So now let's get ready to print that. I want to make sure that is all selected, and I'm going to go to File, Print. Instead of Current Page, I'm going to change that to Current Selection. And I'm going to put that to actual size. So I do have my printer selected, and I can go over in the preview and I'm able to slide where I need that printout to be, because I don't care if it cuts off the top, because I'm going to have to cut that circle out a little bit anyways. And I'm printing the whole thing. Now I'm going to go over to my printer properties. I'm going to make sure that I have the proper printer selected. I'm going to go into Properties, click on that Properties tab. Okay, I'm going to make sure that I have the Print in Grayscale turned off. I have that turned on just to save on toner. So I'm going to turn that off. I'm also, you'll see that there is a selection on some printers for transparencies. I can put that on. But I also like to make sure that that is on color for color options. Now I can change the paper type to a heavyweight as well. So it can be a glossy heavyweight. You might have that option for printing, okay? I'm going to go for best for gloss level. I'm just checking for the finishing color, double check that the printing grayscale is turned off. Okay, I'm okay. So then I will hit OK there, and I'm going to print our transparency. And here it comes. Gosh, I have to dust this printer off. That's just terrible. So I can take that right off the printer. And you'll notice that's got really nice two sides. I can take my nail, I can give it a scratch, and it doesn't scratch off. Now, if you decide to use an inkjet printer, let it dry thoroughly before you try the scratch test method. So there is transparency film available for inkjet printers. You can probably use these with your sublimation printers as well. And it may be totally up to you. You may not want to do the next step. You might just want to go with the transparency. It may need a clear coat, because I do not know how an inkjet transparency is going to react to UV resin. So that's why you can just use a little bit of resin on the transparency film just to see how that's going to react. All right. So this is a UV resin kit that I ordered off of Amazon. So it comes with the resin, a UV light, silicone mat, some spatulas, even some cups if you wanted to try it. I also ordered refill kits. So this is our secret on how to create stained glass without the stain and without the glass. So that's my refill kit there. I've got everything ready. I've got clips. I've got a butane torch. My UV lamp is all ready to go. It's a USB plug-in. And I have my transparency. So now I'm going to cut that out. And you'll see that I cut, if you look to the left-hand side there, I cut quite a bit of the black off of it, because that's going to be able to fit into my front and my back of my laser cut template there. And I don't want it peeking out the edges, but I also want the glue to be able to, adhere the front and the back together. So that's why I cut a little bit of the black off. Okay, so now I've got my two pieces that I needed to tile together. And we're just going to line that up. And I'm just going to use Scotch tape for that. So the first little bit of Scotch tape, well, it always has finger marks on it, or dust, or cat hair. Okay, take that, throw it away. So that you have a nice, clean piece, that this invisible tape will adhere to this properly and look as clear as possible. I mean, we're going to be putting the resin right over top of this tape, so you're not going to see it. And it may take a few tries, but once you get it lined up perfectly, then you will just rub the tape to make sure they're stuck together, and the tape will become more clear as you rub it. And of course, we're going to do the top piece then, and then we are going to cut off the excess tape bits in order for our next step. There we go, with the tape bits gone. Okay, we're going to make sure this is dust free, that our silicone mat is dust free as well. So I've taken my back piece there, and I kept the piece that I cut out, so I can place that inside there. So this way that when I go to put my transparency on top, it is nice and flat. Okay, because I don't want it kind of bowing in the middle where I didn't have any material. I need it to be nice and flat. Now I was quick to realize that the transparency was going to be pretty hard to line up this way. So I decided to actually use the front piece to line up the transparency to first, because I need these to line up flawlessly. So I'm just going to flip over my front piece. I'm going to line up my transparency to that. And then I am going to just use little rolls of the Scotch tape. Okay, and I'm going to put this on the back, anywhere that the black is, because I don't want the tape to be on any colored portion or it's going to show. And we don't want that. We want it hidden in the black portions of the front and the back. Okay, so now we're going to take our back portion and very carefully line it up perfectly before we press down on the tape for it to adhere to stick to the backing. So take your time, try some pinch points, make sure you're all lined up. Because this means when we go to put the top, which is now on the bottom, when we go to put the top on after we epoxy it, we want it perfectly lined up. Okay, so I'm just going to pop in that extra cutout piece that I had saved, because it's going to make sure the backing keeps its shape when we go to flip it over. And it's going to keep the transparency nice and flat. Okay, so we're just double checking that it's still lining up accurately. Okay, so I'm going to carefully remove the top there, and then I'm just using Gorilla Glue. It's not an instant glue. It takes a full day to dry, so don't use super glue in this. You want to have time for the glue to cure along with the epoxy. Okay, so not an instant glue is what I'm trying to say. So I am going to use it in certain spots. So hopefully this will help my transparency stay in place. But I'm also going to make it like a little border as well. And I'm going to put that on the bear, because of course I need the bear and all these pieces to stick together where there will not be epoxy. Now the epoxy UV resin is very thick, so it doesn't settle as much, and it doesn't bleed as much, so it's not very runny. What I'm trying to say, gosh, can't talk today. Okay, so I do expect a little bit of bleed through, but not a lot, because it's very thick. And because the UV light will not cure where the two black pieces are meeting, that's why I'm going to use some Gorilla Glue in some spots. Okay, let's finally get to the UV resin. So make sure it's all dust free, and I'm not really touching the nozzle to the transparency. I'm a few millimeters up, and I'm just adding the epoxy UV resin. I gotta keep saying resin, to it in circles, spreading it around, not getting too close to the edges, but I'm trying to put it on there evenly. So I've made sure, of course, my table is nice and level as well, because the UV resin will self-level as well. So just make sure you're doing it on a level surface is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so I'm just going to speed that up a little bit. Ooh, look how fast I go. So I'm not putting it on very thick, okay? And then I'm using just a clean paintbrush there to help spread it around, level it out, because like I said, it is a thicker product. It will self-level, but it takes quite a bit of time. So I'm just going to move that around with a brush so I'm not making it too thick, because of course we're putting our top piece still on, and the idea is to make the laser cut look like the leading that would be on stained glass. Okay, so it doesn't have to be super thick. Now I'm going to take my butane torch. Okay, I'm just going over that nice and quickly, and that's just going to get rid of any bubbles. You can use your paintbrush as well, a clean tip on that to pop any bubbles as well, but the butane torch really helps. Okay, fingers crossed. We're going to take our top piece now. Carefully line it up before you start to press it down. Oh, this part had me a little nervous. I'll admit it. But then I realized, oh, I'm so glad I did it this way, because when we get to the UV lamp, you're going to see the fails that I did along the way. I will show you. I don't want you guys to think that, I can do everything perfectly the first time. I make mistakes too, but I'm making the mistakes so you guys don't have to. Okay, so now I am just using binder clips. You can get a box of these from the dollar store, really cheap, for or office supply stores. Okay, so I do suggest leaving the clamps at the very edge. Try not to touch any of the resin. Okay, so if a little bit bleeds out, wipe it off, because you don't want to cure it. It is hard as a rock, and it would take a very long time to sand it off. And you don't want to sand off any of your painted surfaces. So this is a UV resin lamp. By pressing the button for 10-15 seconds, you get a minute per time. So you will have to move it along, as each section needs about 5 minutes. So while that's doing its thing, I'm going to show you the epic fail of me trying an SVG file. The laser would bounce to the top, cut a piece, would bounce to the bottom, cut a piece. Yeah, it just did not want to line up whatsoever. And I fought with the SVG files trying to layer them. And I thought, well, this is just too much work. The PNG worked flawlessly. So, yeah, I'm not going to try SVGs anytime soon. Now, this was my very first fail. I decided I would, first try a water slide decal. I thought I would stick that onto the back. It didn't adhere very well. And then I thought I would try to fill the epoxy from the top. Yeah, I wasn't very successful. It looked pretty bad. Then I tried flood filling the whole thing, and I got so many bubbles. So by far, this was the easiest way to make sure I had a back piece, put the transparency in the middle, and put the epoxy on, and then put the top on. So now I have glued on my Pooh Bears and my little bumblebees. So I just used the Gorilla Glue for that. And of course, after I glued them on, I wanted a little bit more of a gloss to just Pooh Bear and the bees. So I used the water-based Diamond Varathane Finished. You don't need any clear coat whatsoever on your Suncatcher part itself. I just did it on the bees and Pooh Bear. So after that is all dry, add a ribbon, a string, a decorative chain, and hang it in a window. Well, I hope this video inspires you guys for your next creation. Don't forget to subscribe. I appreciate each and every one of you.